see people are coming in slowly, and I think we're expecting a few more, but we'll get started because we've got a lot to get through and I want to make the most of our hour today. So hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Welcome to our QWE Masterclass in collaboration with the University of Law. And we're delighted to be running this session for you all today and hope that we'll be able to clarify the qualifying work experience element of this new solicitors qualifying exam and answer all your questions too. We've got a lot to get through today, as I said, and so just to give you an idea of the format of this masterclass, we're going to give you all an overview of the SQE and QWE. We're going to discuss what law firms are doing in terms of QWE, which should help you decide your plans. We'll also discuss the practicalities of getting and recording your QWE, some nuances and details that might be relevant to you. Plus, we'll be sharing the experiences of our panelist, Sophie, as an SQE student currently undertaking her QWE in the format of a training contract at Reeds. Finally, we'll save lots of time for your questions at the end, and we'll do our best to get through as many of them as we can. So firstly, just quickly run through some house rules. So please do use the online question tool to post any questions that you have. And as I said, we'll be getting through as many as we can in the Q&A session at the end of this masterclass. If you are experiencing any audio or visual problems, please also use this tool to report them to us, and we'll do our best to get them sorted for you. Please note, because we have a million emails and questions every single time we host an event, this is being recorded. Yes, it is. And the recording of the session will be sent out to you all, and you'll receive it with all within 24 hours, whether you are watching live or not, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel shortly soon. The University of Law has also kindly provided an FAQs document about QWE, which is attached to this event as a handout, so you can use that for your reference and download that as well. And finally, don't forget about the SQE Hub, which is on Law Careers.net. It has everything you need to know about the solicitors qualifying exam, and it's sponsored by the University of Law. We are very regularly updating content on there and answering all these specific questions you have. So do definitely use this as your first port of call for research on the SQE and QWE. So great, I'm going to start just by quickly doing some polls, just so we can see where you are and how confident you are feeling in SQE and QWE. So first of all, just to check where everybody is. So if you could just answer what stage that you're at, and this might help us in our discussions today as well. Give you all just a couple of seconds to please answer this. Okay, so I'm going to close this and just share the results of everyone. So you can see a lot of people actually are postgraduate students, so that's interesting, and perhaps we'll be able to answer some of your QWE questions as we go throughout. Let me just hide that. We've got another one. So how confident are you in understanding QWE? Very confident, somewhat, not confident, or unsure. Right, just give you all a couple more seconds to put your answer. We've got a few people who are very confident, which is great, but as expected, the majority of you are not confident or somewhat confident. So we really hope that today we'll be able to kind of help boost your confidence in knowing how it works and how you're going to do your QWE. And then finally, just on that, do you know how you will collect your QWE? Have you planned this yet, or are you not sure? And again, I'm going to give you all a few more seconds on that, and then we'll share those results. Okay, and again, as expected, most people don't know, a few people do, and lots of people are unsure. And again, hopefully we'll be able to clarify and help you decide your next steps in today's masterclass. Fab. Okay, so that's really great to get an insight of where you all are today. So we're going to get started. So first up, I'd love our panelists to introduce themselves. So John, I'll start with you, please.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is John Watkins. I am the Director of Employability at the University of Law. So I'm responsible for helping students to determine their future career paths and to assist them in achieving those goals.
Great to have you here today. And Sophie, I think I already started introducing you earlier. I'm sorry, I stole your thunder.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Sophie Lloyd. I'm currently a third seat trainee at Freights LLP, which is a top 50 law firm. But just as a bit of background, I went to state school, I went to the University of Birmingham to then do a law degree, and I joined Freights as a legal assistant on their legal assistant programme. I was in employment whilst I was a legal assistant, and then I did a training contract first seat there, a second seat in care, which is a mixture of corporate and real estate. And as I said, right now I'm in corporate.
Great, thank you, Sophie. And we're looking forward to hearing a bit more of your experiences of your kind of training contract and SQE prep a bit later today. Okay, so let's go kick things off. And I think it'd probably help if we gave a good overview of the SQE and QWE. So John, I'm going to go to you for this one. If you could kind of run us through what counts as QWE, because I can see that's already come in as a question from somebody, and perhaps an explanation of where the students have to do QWE on their SQE journey and how that all works, please.
Okay, keeping it as simple as possible, the LPC plus a 2-year training contract allows you to qualify as a solicitor. The SQE is the replacement for the LPC. We're in transition at the moment, and on top of the SQE exams, you need to get 2 years worth of qualifying work experience. So overall, exams plus 2 years, a lot of similarities in terms of that, but the content of the subject matter in terms of the courses is slightly different, and the nature of what you can do to gather that 2 years worth of work experience is also slightly different. The intention with the SQE QWE regime is to make it more flexible, more likely that you can obtain relevant work experience through a greater variety of different mechanisms. In its simplest terms, qualifying work experience is practical work-based experience, which would be the sort of work that would be undertaken by somebody who is operating as a solicitor, providing legal services. So it needs to meet that requirement. It has to allow you to develop competencies, a minimum of 2, and it has to be confirmed by somebody who is either a solicitor in England and Wales or a CULP, which is a compliance officer for legal practice. You need 24 months in total, which can be made up of 4 different component parts. They don't need to be equal parts. They could be different amounts as long as there's only 4 of them. You would need to get those individual pieces of work experience approved, confirmed by somebody who was either a solicitor or a CULP. So those are the primary things that are in play. You do not need to be in a formal training contract. You do not need to rotate between seats. You can pick it up in many different ways so long as you meet those requirements, providing legal services, having the opportunity to develop competencies. It doesn't say that you have to develop them or reach a certain standard. But remember, in terms of the relationship you have with your employer and future employers, they will be looking for you to develop and show competencies at the highest possible level to operate within their firms, not just to comply with the requirements here to qualify. So that is the overriding starting point for today's discussion in terms of what the SQE is and how qualifying work experience works at its very highest level.
Great, thanks, John. And I think a lot of those kind of further points we'll come on to, and we'll go through some kind of more nuances and details of exactly how people can record and get their QWE accredited, and we'll cover that a bit later. But I think what you've done there is very greatly summarise the whole concept of QWE, and to explain that it's supposed to be flexible, and it's a lot more flexible than the old kind of training contract system. But of course, what we need to talk about as well is that firms are adopting QWE kind of differently across the board, and it'd be great to go over to Sophie now, and Sophie, to hear how your kind of QWE is incorporated into your kind of graduate apprenticeships training contract style work experience that you're doing. So perhaps you can give us an overview of how that's working for you.
Oh, okay, so at Freights, I'm part of the first cohort to go through the new SQE and QWE route. So literally the cohort just before me, they've all done their LPC and they're all doing their training contract. So the adjustment is literally just in the name at Freights in terms of the on-the-job time. So instead of being a trainee solicitor, I'm a graduate apprentice, and I do the 2 years of a traditional training contract really at Freights. So I started last February, And at the same time as starting my 2 years qualifying work experience, kind of in the form of a training contract, I also started studying for my SQE. So it's kind of a long and thin course that I'm doing for the SQE with University of Law. So the arrangement between ULaw and Freeds is that we do 4 days on the job per week, and that's really getting the experience that we need to sign off our qualifying work experience. And then 1 day, which I've very carefully chosen as a Friday, being my study day, which is off the job, and that's when I'm revising and studying for my SQE. So like you said, it can be done really flexibly, but some firms such as mine have tried to stick to the traditional route as much as possible.
Yes, and of course you're doing it the graduate apprenticeship way, which is where you are studying for the SQE while obtaining your QWE. And perhaps, John, we can go here and say firms are doing it differently. So there are other ways where some firms are asking their future kind of trainees before they start their QWE to prepare for the SQE and take those SQE assessments. So perhaps, I don't know if it's easy to summarize, because lots of firms are doing different things, but perhaps important to emphasize that firms are doing it differently. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Just to emphasize really that this is new for everybody, and I think the firms are adjusting to this as part of a wider set of challenges that they face in terms of the post-COVID experience, the cost of living crisis, and other dramas that are affecting businesses at the moment. So this is another thing to accommodate, and clearly it's absolutely critical because it is their primary asset, people, that they are looking after. But I don't think there's a script that says this is how to do it, which is great on the one hand, but on the other hand means that it takes time and it takes effort to try and work out what's best for you. So you're absolutely right. As we make this transition at the moment, there are firms saying, well, do the SQE as you would have done the LPC and then come and join us and do 2 years. There are others who are saying, actually, let's do this in phases. So come and do some work, do some study, do some work, do some study, and move along that way. And there's others, many people out there, some perhaps attending today, who have been working in a legal role or some other role without really any study having taken place yet. So they've actually accumulated quite a lot of work experience. The question, and we'll come on to it later on, is whether that's actually qualifying work experience. And therefore, actually, they've got the 2 years. Now they just need the exams on top. It is a confusing pattern. It is a bit tricky. It's therefore my view, the view of the University of Law, that it really comes down to getting individual advice about your individual circumstances. So it is difficult, I'm afraid, for everyone to go away today having the single answer. The single answer that matters for you is what is right for you and your personal circumstances.
Great, and perhaps Sophie, we can hear from you. What inspired you to apply to Freeds and kind of do it through this route? Was it a kind of firm first approach, or was it there was a type of way of getting your work experience that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so the decision was kind of taken away from me. I think I joined Freeds assuming that they would put me through the LPC route, and then I was told that I'd be a guinea pig and I'd be put through the SQE route, which obviously embraced with open arms. In terms of applying beforehand, so I finished university in 2020, and you tend to start applying for the traditional training contracts back in the day in 2nd and 3rd year uni. So I was just looking for that. And then when the new SQE route came out, I was already at Freeds. So like I said, the decision was kind of taken away from me. But had I been in the situation now where I graduated uni and I wanted to be a solicitor but couldn't necessarily gain a traditional training contract, I think the opportunities are endless. You just need to find the right ones, and like John said, get some advice tailored to your specific situation.
And Bethany, I think it's an important thing to emphasise again that Sophie is going to end up as a qualified solicitor, and she could have done it down the LPC route had circumstances prevailed with Freeds or somebody else. As it is, she's doing the SQE route, but ultimately she will end up in the same place, as she will indeed with the cohort before who have taken the previous route. They will end up as qualified solicitors, so will Sophie and her cohort. So actually with history, looking back on it, they will be qualified solicitors, and there won't be much of an examination about which route did you take. So this is again a really important point, that ultimately you end up in the same place, qualifying as a solicitor and then going on to fulfill your career, and it doesn't matter which particular route you take.
Great, thank you for clarifying that, John. And Sophie, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on how you found obtaining your kind of QWE and doing your training contract at the same time as studying for your SQE, which I know exams are coming up very soon, as we were just talking about before we started. So that kind of apprenticeship route, how has that worked for you?
So it took a bit of getting used to be honest, because when I was a legal assistant, I worked 5 days a week, and then dropping down to 4 kind of breaks up your week, and you need to learn to switch off from work and then focus on your studies. But I have found, especially with the seats that I've chosen, lots of it goes hand in hand. So I've had real estate experience, and now that's really helping with land law and property practice. And now I'm in corporate law, and that's really helping with business practice. So lots of the seats that I've tried have really helped my understanding of the SQE topics I'm doing through the University of Law. Did you want me to talk now about how I'm collecting evidence, or is that a slightly different question?
Well, why not? Let's do it now while you're here.
So there's kind of 2 different ways that I need to show evidence. So through the QWE route, need to collate lots of journal entries that I do. So 3 times a week, I create a journal entry about the work I've done that week, and that shows what solicitor standard I'm meeting. And then my supervisor at the end of each seat signs that off. So like John said, your supervisor, a qualified lawyer, or the CULP in your firm need to sign off that experience. And then separately at University of Law, they require a portfolio. So I'm kind of screenshotting lots of the work I'm doing, redacting the bits that are confidential, and saying this meets this standard because I've shown this quality. So it seems like a lot of extra tasks to do, but if you can just put aside half an hour each week, you can really stay on top of gathering the information that you need to qualify as a lawyer.
Yeah, and I guess doing it as you go along is going to be a much easier way than kind of having to look back and remember something you've done ages ago.
Yeah. I've heard stories about people in the last few weeks before qualifying trying to sit there and run back to all their old seats and say, do you remember if I did this? So I think it's a really good practice, no matter if you're at a law firm or advice clinic or anything, whilst you're trying to get your QWE experience, just do it along the way.
And presumably Freeth is kind of supporting you and reminding you, and giving you guidance on how to submit this information as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we use a platform called Fresh Unity, and if you fall behind on your Fresh Unity entries, you do get pulled up on it. So yeah, they keep us in line.
It's good. Just to go back to you, John, and I think this is going to be a really big point and something we really need to emphasise. So we've spoken about the fact that Sophie's doing this graduate apprenticeship. A lot of firms are still doing that traditional 2-year training contract model, getting people to do their SQE assessments and pass before they go and do their QWE. And of course, people can be individually starting to build up their bank of QWE, at any time essentially. So the big question is, students can start building up their QWE before they start applying to firms, but will law firms accept QWE when they haven't been training the candidates themselves?
If we take a little bit of a step back in terms of opportunities to gain work experience, those are always valuable, whether it's a summer job, a part-time job whilst you're studying, or a legal assistant role or a paralegal role, which you might be undertaking with a view to moving on to the next step. So whatever happens, that is valuable experience. It's strengthening your CV. It is improving your readiness to meet the challenges of the workplace and to excel and perform. The big question you rightly ask is whether or not that will be counting as qualifying work experience and whether it will be recognised. They're 2 separate questions. If it meets the requirements that I outlined at the start, then it is qualifying work experience. It should be approved, confirmed by an individual who is able to do so. There are a few challenges in there. You've got to make sure the person knows in advance that that's what you're going to expect them to do, and that they are aware of what you're doing and are keeping a close eye in terms of being able to confirm that they've seen and are happy with what's taken place. But in reality, you should be able to claim it. Now, there are issues we know with people who are not so willing to confirm, but the reality is that if you've done those things, then it'll become harder and harder, particularly when we look at things current and future, accepting that the retrospective people that did stuff 2 years ago when the regime hadn't really come in may be saying, well, I didn't know I was expected to do this at the time you did the work, and therefore there's an issue, or indeed that somebody has left that organization so is not around to sign off anyway. So the 2 years is there. Now, whether or not someone recognizes the 2 years is clearly important, because if you've done 2 years worth of qualifying work experience and you've passed the exams, then in theory you're a qualified solicitor and we're looking for a role as a qualified solicitor. If you've done 12 months, then you would hope to be coming in for 1 more year of qualifying work experience, and then you would qualify. I think you have to put your commercial hat on here and look at this from the firm's perspective. They need people to be able to perform work at a certain level that they can then charge to clients at a certain level to make the money profit that they want to be able to make. So they need to be able to have the right balance of staff, and that will mean that they can only have so many people operating at certain salary levels. Over time, we will see whether those salary levels change or whether the job descriptions change. But the bottom line is, whether or not they accept it, you are a more attractive candidate in terms of coming in, and therefore you can certainly be using that to be able to enhance your chances of getting success. It'll be clearer in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 18 months' time, that there will be standards set. There will be people who probably challenge and say, someone's refusing to sign this off, what does it mean? And we'll get much clearer indication. Right here, right now, record what you're doing as well as you can. Make sure you talk to the people who are going to be signing off. Give it absolutely, as Sophie says, priority each week to do something. Don't fall behind because circumstances could get out of control. And in that position, you are in the best possible position to be able to take your portfolio of experience and use it either to add formal QWE or to at least feel much, much more confident in your employability.
Great, thank you, and I apologise if you can hear any background noise. There's a very loud helicopter flying overhead. But yeah, I think that's great. And what I wanted to say as well is that at Law Careers Net, we're very much of the opinion that put your commercial hat on, as you said, Johnny. If you're applying to there's a dream firm or a dream set of firms that you want to apply to, see what they're doing, because there's no point you going in with your own QWE if you know, for example, that they're really want to train up their own trainees and put them through their kind of SQE prep courses and then their own 2-year QWE in the firm. So always look at what your shortlisted firms are doing and let that make your decision as well, which is why research into what sort of lawyer you want to be, what sort of law you want to practice, what sort of firm you want to work for at an early stage is really going to help you inform your decision on what to do with QWE. Great, so let's move on to talk a bit more about some practicalities of getting QWE. And again, I can see lots of questions coming in from people asking about this sort of thing, so I think this will be really helpful. So John, I think you've covered this, I'm sure you have, but just to confirm, how many different QWE placements can a student do?
The maximum you can do is 4, which accumulate to 24 months in total. So it could be 24 months on its own, just 1, or it could be 4 times 6. It doesn't have to be even. You could be claiming, as little as a month or possibly 6 weeks as being the smallest amount. But I think probably again the expectation and where we'll end up is that, broadly speaking, for it to be meaningful work, it probably needs to be 3 months plus. But in terms of the rules, if you've got 23 months from 3 sources and you can find a month from somewhere else, then that would be sufficient to be able to get you the 24 months in total with the maximum of 4 placements.
And Sophie's spoken about how she's recording her QWE at Freeds, but just generally, what is the guidance for students and candidates on how they are supposed to officially record their QWE?
Well, there is a template on the SRA website. There are also other templates that have emerged and are useful, and obviously systems as Sophie has to be able to use to record information. Essentially, it's really about making sure that you know what you did, when you did it, and particularly around those competencies. And this is the whole purpose here, is not just to sort of tick boxes and say, yes, I've got 2 competencies. It's about thinking that the competencies actually are going to be critical for your future success in your career over the next decade. So actually, it's about saying, well, I can tick the 2 boxes, but what could I have done more, perhaps to develop 3 or 4 or 5 other competencies? Or am I not getting development in areas that that would be useful, even though I don't necessarily have to get any more in them? So I think it's a useful stand back process. But I would use the templates. They are kept as simple as possible to record the factual information and make sure that people have something they can present to the person who they want to sign off and say, this is the easiest possible way for you to understand what I'm asking you to do. And again, making it simple for someone is much more likely to give a positive answer.
Great. And Sophie, you did speak about this earlier. Is there anything else you want to mention about recording your QWE or how it's going to be accredited by Freeds?
I think it's just keeping up communication. So in my current team, I'm the first SQE trainee that they've had as part of the rotation. So they're not used to having to think about, is she working towards this competency and have we helped her? Have we given her the opportunity to develop this? So just starting out when you're a trainee or going for work experience and just explaining how it works. And then they're way more likely once a week to sit down with you if you're struggling to find the tasks and evidence yourself. They can remind you, oh, well, you did that on Monday. Is that not good enough evidence? Let's screenshot that. So I think it's just keeping up the communication and, like I said earlier, just keeping consistent with it.
John, the timelines of registering your QWE, you know, can someone go, oh, okay, well, 2 years ago I volunteered at a pro bono clinic, so, you know, can people backdate it like that, or is it recommended that you're kind of registering it and recording it kind of during the experience or shortly after?
Try and make this a simple answer to a complicated question. I mean, let's ignore the backdating for a moment. I know it's an important one, so we'll come to it. If you've completed some experience, then you can record it on the MySRA website. There's a very useful video on there that tells you what you need to do and how you do it. It's actually only the point in which you wish to confirm your application that you actually need to determine which are the periods that you are going to use, and as you go through, if you have got little bits here and there, you might need to work out which are the 4 bits I'm actually going to use. So to that extent, you might want to hold fire in terms of committing to which of the ones you want to do, but you also need to recognize that the longer you wait, the bigger the gap between the period of doing the work and potentially the risks of the person you need to sign off being around to do so. The answer from the backdating is that yes, you can backdate. There is very clear guidance that says that if you've done stuff over the previous few years, then you are able to go back and backdate that, but you have to meet the requirements, which is to have somebody signing off who is able to confirm that you've done what you say you've done. If that person didn't know they were asked to do it, then they may be more reluctant to say yes, you've done it, but then somebody else who might say, yes, I remember very well, and we've got good records, because of course back at the start, before the regime came in, people wouldn't have been keeping those detailed records because they weren't necessarily expecting to be able to do it. But go back with good records, go back with a positive, assertive attitude that actually the SRA says that you should be looking positively at requests for confirmation. You shouldn't be looking to find the holes in the argument, and that, you know, as long as you feel comfortable that the requirements have been met, provided legal services had the opportunity to develop the competencies, then you should look favourably upon providing that approval. We are getting lots of questions from lots of students all of the time about how do we persuade someone who's being reluctant? How do I find somebody who's now left the organisation? The current organisation says we haven't got the records. We know it's a really frustrating area. We haven't got the magical solution, but we're providing little tips and hints about how you can perhaps chip away at trying to provide so much useful information that it becomes really hard for somebody to say no.
With this new flexibility, I guess the onus really is on the individual to be proactive, to record it, you know, to pursue people and to make sure that things are being signed off in the way they want. So I think that's a really good tip, is being proactive and as you go through your QWE or any work experience that you're doing as well. Right, let's move on. So many questions are coming in, so I'm going to have to save lots of time at the end, but I think we're answering many as we go through. John, this question's come in lots, and I think it's going to be a popular one. Can QWE be undertaken abroad?
Yes, it can. the requirements are that it needs to be confirmed by a solicitor qualified in England and Wales, or a COLP, as we described earlier on. So if you're working abroad and there is no figure who meets that description, then you are thwarted in that aim, unless there is a UK or an England or Wales qualified solicitor who has been asked by the person who is supervising to sign off on their behalf, where again the requirement is they understand the work's going on, they're close enough to it to be able to say yes. But many people that I've come across are working for somebody who is based abroad but is an England and Wales qualified solicitor, in which case then following exactly the same rules, yes, you can.
Very much. And just thinking about the kind of the timelines, because obviously we're saying, you know, everything's so much more flexible. So I wonder if the University of Law has a stance on in which order students or candidates should seek QWE first, or should you reckon they should start an SQE preparation course, or is it, you know, as we said earlier, entirely up to your individual circumstances and the kind of employer that you're looking to go into?
Yeah, very much individual circumstances. There are a lot of new employers coming into the market who previously wouldn't have gone down the old regime. It didn't work for them. And now they are spotting the opportunity to be able to come up with something that works for them as a business. And very often that is do a period of work during our really busy time, and then do some studies in a slightly quieter time. Then make sure you're back in with us in the busy time. So I think that working alongside is quite attractive. What it requires is really good on-the-job support, because you've got somebody who is still very much at the early stages of the study. They haven't got the same starting point as somebody who perhaps has completed their postgraduate studies and is in the situation where you might have been in the former LPC days. So you do need to know that you're going to get proper supervision and support for something that will help you go along on your journey. So I think you've got a new wave of employers that are available. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. If you do all of your QWE first, then clearly you know what it's like in practice, but you've got to deliver on the examination front, and you know you need the two things together. But for some people, both financially and just the fact that they're in that opportunity, it's better to do it that way round. Taking a fully completed SQE course and presenting yourself to an employer means that they haven't got to worry about any further study at any point. They can just go straight into it. I think the most interesting ones are the ones that try and do it alongside. Sophie's described how she has one day off. That's part of the formal apprenticeship. So not describing a day off, Sophie has one day a week which is devoted to the studies. That's because it has to be under the apprenticeship rules, but it's not a similar approach that might be required if somebody is going through the straightforward SQE route. You do need to allow time for people to study, people to be able to accumulate the knowledge. But as Sophie's indicated, the big advantage, if you're studying real estate and you're working on real estate clients at the same time, that's a great combination to put theory into practice very quickly, rather than waiting 2 years. You did that real estate a long time ago, and now suddenly you're thrust into the real life client situation. So there's no right answer. It's very individual, and certainly in the initial period, I think a lot of education of employers is quite important. We're seeing lots and lots of students coming to us for help about how do I present this to a potential employer to get them to support me through the journey, because they don't know anything, they don't understand it. So there's a big education piece there, and I'm sure as time goes on, then 2 or 3 traditional paths will emerge, and maybe the variety and the options won't be quite as wide and varied as we're perhaps talking about now, but the 2 or 3 that do operate will become much clearer, and people will see which is the obvious path for them.
Thank you. Sophie, I'll come to you in 1 second. We're not neglecting you, I promise. John, I just have one more question, which I think is an important one to cover, because obviously with this flexibility of doing QWE, you know, could in the olden days of the training contract route, how it used to be, you know, there were certain kind of contentious and non-contentious parts you had to do, and you had to kind of rotate around different seats. But obviously, if people building up their own QWE, theoretically, could they build it up in just one particular area of the law, one type of law, and then are you then going to have to only specialize in that area once you qualify? So perhaps some guidance and thoughts on that would be great.
Yes, it's a really important question, because the requirements have been removed now, so you do not need to do those rotation of seats and the different experiences, which does make it easier. But one of the reasons why those seats were put in play is that to become a rounded solicitor, it's really important to understand the different parts of what's going on, and indeed to discover which one you most enjoy, which one you're best at. So that is something that is being pursued by a number of employers, bringing in SQE to replace LPC, but still going for a rotation system across a number of seats. So think very long and hard. If you can grab 24 months worth of work experience and make it qualifying work experience, but it's the wrong work experience, because you're then effectively saying that you can only show off experience in one route, then that could have longer term challenges for you to be able to pursue other areas. Not impossible, but don't be too hung up, and I know this is really easy to say, but don't be too hung up about rushing to the finish line and qualifying as quickly as possible. Careers will go on for a long time. If it takes a little bit longer to get over that initial threshold and qualify, it might in the fullness of time be a better route than rushing as quickly as you can and then getting a bit frustrated a bit further down the line.
Yes, thank you. And Sophie, I think maybe you can come in here and talk about the different seats that you've undertaken in your graduate apprenticeship. And I always hear from kind of trainees and people in firms that it's often the areas that they don't expect to enjoy that they do, which is why keeping an open mind and these more formal training contract graduate apprenticeship routes is always good, because you could end up loving something you didn't know. So perhaps if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's absolutely right. What you think you'll love the most, you might not. And I also think there's a big deal made about what you like at uni and whether you'll exceed in that. But studying land law at university is not the same as being a real estate lawyer, and you soon find that out when you do it in practice. So I guess my advice would be keep an open mind. You do, in my situation, you do get to submit preferences to HR, and then they put you into the seat, and hopefully it's one of your preferences. But you've got to remember as well, it's a business, so it's based on business needs. And if I wanted to go and be a family lawyer, but Freights don't need a family lawyer in my office, then I need to accept that and kind of readjust my preferences. So it's keeping an open mind. Don't close yourself off too soon, and if you did a law degree, don't base it on what you did well at uni.
Thank you. And I wonder if I can stick with you, Sophie. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about how you found your SQE preparation course that you were doing with the University of Law, because I know that's on your one day a week and you're doing it online, I believe. So perhaps just share how that's been going, how you found that's prepared you for the assessments which are coming up very soon.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm due to sit SQE 1 in July, so next month. Counting down the days, I think my first exam's actually 3 weeks today, which is scary. So I think I mentioned earlier, but Freights are putting us through the long and thin online SQE course with the University of Law. So I started it at the same time that I started my training contract back in February 2022. And what tends to happen on my study day, the one day a week that I don't work, is you log on, you see what the unit is for that day. So for example, it could be Property Practice Unit 1, and then you have textbooks that you need to read. You have lots of preparation tasks that are provided by the University of Law, and then you go onto a wonderful platform called SignUp, which is a huge question bank, and you can do practice questions, and then you must sit a weekly test, which is just 10 or 15 questions, but they're in the single best answer style questions. So that's exactly how I'm tested for SQE1 next month. So I have been doing SBACs, as they're called, for a long time. So I think I'm used to the format of them. There's a question, a little bit of facts, and then 5 answers. You tend to be able to rule out a few of them, and then you really have to think, what is the best answer here? So yeah, I'm feeling prepared. Fingers crossed.
Great. We wish you the best of luck, and I know you're on study leave from next week, so we're hoping it all goes well for you. John, just over to you on ULAW's kind of advice on SQE preparation courses, because obviously you have a whole range of different courses for people to kind of on different situations, coming from non-law backgrounds and kind of shorter ones, online ones, and I've also seen a question come saying, do I even need to do an SQE preparation course? Which of course the answer is technically no, probably should do. So I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say about the kind of variety of preparation courses on offer at the University of Law.
I think that the one common area of agreement amongst all the stakeholders, particularly employers, is that it's extremely difficult to go from a non-law course into the SQE without doing some sort of conversion. So under the old days, the GDL took you from having studied a non-law course and got you ready to be able to sit the LPC. And I think the sense for employers is they're very attracted to non-law candidates, but they do feel as if that there needs to be that awareness that the PGDL or the MA law course will allow you to be able to come across. Clearly, I recognise that that's an investment financially, and there's further investment that needs to be made as well. So it's a difficult decision to make on that front. The flexibility in the study terms again is there, that you can do no preparation, you can go on the shortest preparation course, or you can do the LLM legal practice, which SQE 1 and 2, which effectively is a master's course. It would be wrong for me to recommend which one of those is the best, but simplistically, there is more content in the master's course than there is in the SQE prep courses, and therefore in terms of passing SQE, there shouldn't be any difference between which ones you do. But you are covering a lot more content in the master's course, which perhaps allows you to present yourself to a future employer as having a more solid starting point than somebody that hasn't done that. That was never the intention of this change of regime. It was really intended to try and make it more open for the profession and reduce the amount of study that's needed. But I suppose what we've ended up concluding here is that it's a very complicated profession. It's not one that you can get into easily. It's not one that you can just skim the surface and try and end up with a starting point of knowledge which is sufficient. If anything, employers are asking for more and more and more, and not just around the technical knowledge, but also the work readiness, the wider employability skills, which are quite difficult to factor into an educational course. But through things like time management, through things like problem solving, through some of the practical aspects of SQE2, there is certainly more of that in play. And I think the final comment that's worth putting across is that the SQE, the initial experience is that it's been quite tough. So I think again, it's just worth recognizing that this is not an easier qualification. Hopefully, it's not a harder qualification. It's a very comparable qualification at the end of the day. But the choices that you make are ones that are difficult, and again probably come back to having conversation with trusted individuals who you feel can give you the answers you need to the questions that you ask, rather than perhaps steering you directly towards one answer or another answer.
And of course, in the case of Sophie was a good example, saying you had your choice taken away from you in the fact that you had this graduate apprenticeship with Freeth, and then they kind of told you which SQE prep course you're going to be doing. So that's always just worth bearing in mind for people who are perhaps unsure. Then one route would be to decide which firm you wanted to apply for, and then of course they would then dictate how you do your QWE and kind of SQE preparation as well. And just a reminder here that there is lots more information about the SQE on our SQE hub, plus every firm that has a directory entry on LawCrisnet is also explaining what they're doing in terms of SQE and QWE on their profile. So that's a good kind of database of what all the firms are doing if you want that information. Okay, I'm going to go to answer some of our questions, unless there is anything else that Sophie or John want to cover before we dive into all our questions that we've got.
No, go for the questions.
No, go for it. Fire away. Okay. Well, a lot of people have kind of sent very kind of individual questions about whether this or that would count as QWE, and I think we probably have answered this, but so John, for you, so someone has said, would a legal receptionist count as QWE or a legal assistant? But I suppose I can guess what you're going to say is you've got to demonstrate all those competencies as we spoke about and get it signed off.
That is what I'm going to say, but I'm also going to emphasize that there's a lot of different job descriptions out there, and I've certainly seen legal receptionists who are doing paralegal and above work in some respects. I've also seen legal receptionists who have been more receptionists than anything else, and therefore it's about understanding the work that you're doing. And that does also allow a little bit of freedom for some time, where you might be thinking, well, there's some things that I'm doing, but there's some things that are not. Well, if you push yourself forward and say, I'd like to do more of this, I can get involved in that, then you might well find that your employer says, yeah, that would be really helpful. And actually the bonus is that it does allow you to develop more skills. It also gives you a chance to be more impressive in that organization and the chance to move onwards and upwards. But yeah, I mean, it is the most common question, Bethany, is does this count? And the only answer you'll get is if the SRA ultimately say, yes, we confirm that we agree that this is, but it's not a particularly high threshold on paper. Providing legal services, allowing the opportunity to develop two competencies. But what we've heard from Sophie, who is working for a firm here, who are a highly reputed firm, the sort of firm that many people would be looking at to work for them, is being pushed very hard to make very clear assessments on a weekly basis of the sort of work that she's doing and how it's developing and improving her as an individual. And so that, I think, is a bit of a contrast to the more basic sounding, it doesn't sound too difficult to comply with the requirements, through to the reality of the workplace, where actually you need to prove yourself to be able to deliver at a level probably above that if you're going to go on and be successful within the organization.
And another question just linked to that is that we're talking about a lot about these competencies that we have to demonstrate. So just to be clear, these competencies are on the SRA's website, and it's very clear and easy to kind of see. Sophie, you're nodding, so you probably had experience, but it's very easy to understand which ones you need to meet and to provide that evidence of that.
Yeah, they're just simple things like drafting, negotiation, working with other people, using ethics and judgment, and being professional. So yeah, just take a look at them and start assessing, am I meeting these? They all have bullet points underneath about how you can prove them. And yeah, just start the communication with your employer.
Another question, would paralegal experience add towards QWE? Yes, I think same answer as before. John, anything to add?
It's going to be a challenge, I think, for paralegals, because there's no doubt that the work that they'll be doing is increasingly being pushed up higher and higher, and therefore is very much likely to meet those requirements. The onward conversation that says, I've now done 2 years worth of qualifying work experience, I want to change status from being a paralegal, either to be formally recognized for a higher level performance, or if you're doing studies alongside, to actually be treated as a newly qualified solicitor, versus those that were brought in either on a training contract or equivalent for QWE, who followed a more prescribed path. That's going to be a really awkward conversation for employers. It's also going to be a very difficult one for paralegals, because it won't be a case of automatically you cross the threshold. So there's, again, open dialogue, I think, required. And it probably boils down to, if you perform well in the workplace, whatever you're doing, you increase your chances of getting a favourable response. But it's a commercial decision, again, for employers. They can't simply say, we've got 20 paralegals, we're going to make them all newly qualified, unless they decide that, but we're going to pay them a paralegal salary. Because putting them up to a newly qualified salary is going to make it impossible for them to survive financially. So we could see some movement on job titles and salaries as this becomes clearer in people's minds.
A couple of people have asked about in-house kind of legal work experience. So Adam's asking, saying that their employer offers opportunities to assist their legal team. This is obviously an in-house legal team. Would this qualify as QWE? And I think we're going to say the same again, John. Yeah,
very possibly. In-house is certainly now a recognised way of achieving things. At university, if you're doing pro bono work and clinics, I mean, undoubtedly those are also developing. The question is the amount of time. So certainly somebody that does pro bono with me at the University of Law may volunteer half a dozen times, cumulatively maybe 24 hours, 30 hours, something like that. It's great experience, fantastic for the CV and all sorts of other things, but it's probably not going to be used as one of your 4 component parts. We have a four-week program that we do, which, again, people might ultimately end up using as part of their their 24 months, but probably the greater benefit comes from 4 weeks of work experience and interacting with clients and developing the skills that comes from it. But certainly, as an in-house opportunity presents itself, take it not only because it might be QWE, but because it sounds like a really good opportunity to develop as an individual.
Great, thank you. So many people have asked whether their individual circumstances or things they've done count as QWE. So it's definitely, you know, as we were saying, it's, you know, something you've really got to think about. So we're not going to be able to answer all of them. So I'm going to move on to a different theme now. Amy has asked, what happens if you fail SQE 1 or 2? Do you have to pay to do it again? John?
I suspect you have to pay some. Yeah, yes. I mean, the payment for sitting exams is independent from the payment for the course. So again, back in tradition, if you failed the LPC, you needed to resit the LPC, and there was a cost associated. So I think if you're applying for you know, the opportunity to sit an exam and you fail it and you have to apply for another one, there would be a cost associated with that, whether you decided to do a further course or not. And I think this is another important point, because so many people are having to work alongside studies at the moment. It's a real balance to strike, and this is just for a pure student who isn't formally working in the way that Sophie is. You know, for financial reasons, needing to work alongside studies, we are seeing a lot of people, you know, struggling more with the studies and having to get that balance right. And there may be a judgment call in certain points, you know, if you're struggling with the studies, that something on the work front may need to give off, or you might need to delay the studies so you give yourself a fair chance of succeeding. Just going back on your previous point, Bethany, and wrapping up that one, it is individual support. You know, we have a lot of students coming to the employability service at the University of Law looking for that advice. If you are listening and you're a student of the university, then please do contact your local employability service. If you're a student at a different university, then I hope that you will have comparable colleagues in play who can provide some advice. And certainly once you've accepted a place to come to somewhere like the University of Law, you can get advice immediately. The attachment that we provided as part of the handout is a very high level, but nonetheless, hopefully still informative document for anyone and everyone to look at today.
Let me just see, we've got a few minutes left. And again, yeah, I think it's just worth emphasising, because we did cover this, but somebody has asked, do you have to go to university to study an SQE preparation course, or can you revise for it by yourself? I think I did cover this, John. I don't know if you want to say anything. You
can revise for it for yourself. You know, that you know is an option, but I have to say that it's so beneficial to have a class of comrades around you who are going through the same experience, so that you can support each other through the challenges of taking the exams. And often you'll find a student is good in one subject, struggles in another, but a classmate can provide the counter to that. And it's a people-based profession. Technology is playing such a huge part at the moment, but if you are taught by people who've been there and done it, who can bring the law to life. You know, I had a client once who had a real estate situation, and this was how it unfolded, and this thing happened. And you learn so much more about the broader picture, not just the technical law. You know, how did you handle that client that got very emotional, and how did you deal with the situation the trains weren't working on the day that you needed to go by train to get somewhere? So you can do it, and clearly for some people it may be the only option. But I think where you can make that commitment that you are going to invest in your education, that being in and around a place that is expert in providing that, with fellow students who are going to raise your game and give you support when you need it, is probably the better route. But admittedly, I've got a slightly biased view on that perspective.
Sophie, someone's actually asked you why did you choose to study your SQE prep course for the University of Law, and just I know you said that it was, you know, that was the firm's kind of partnership with the University of Law, but I just wondered if you had any other experiences or insights you wanted to share about your preparation course, about the University of Law, how you found the kind of studying while working, sorry.
I think if I did have the choice, I would have gone with University of Law anyway. I knew a lot about them from my time at university. So even if I wasn't doing it through Fruits paying for it, I know there are other course providers, but it's quite likely that I would have gone with the University of Law. And in terms of how I'm finding it alongside my work. As I said, it's really helpful both in work life and studying to kind of take the learnings from each of them. And I think once my employer embraced the SQE and me having my study day on Friday and then having to like hand over some stuff on Thursday evening, it has been a really good process because I've been practicing all my weekly tests, and like I said, I feel like I've done so many SBAC questions now that I'm really prepared for SQE1 next month. So I think finding the balance, like John said, between work and SQE can be tricky, even if you're like working in a law firm or working so that you can fund your SQE yourself. But I would definitely say if you can do a prep course, because I got a first class degree at university and it's a lot of black letter law and a lot of then law in practice, and I don't think I could have studied for this myself. I think I needed the preparation course. So admittedly financial issues sometimes, but if you can get a firm to pay for it or if you can work alongside it, I really recommend doing a preparation course.
Definitely. And just a note that there's lots of information on Law Quiznet about funding various postgrad and preparation courses. So if you are kind of worried or interested in finding out more, do check that out. Okay, time for one or two more. This is an interesting question, and you definitely mentioned this earlier, John, about employers themselves kind of being a little bit unsure about how QWE is working and being signed off. So someone has said that, you know, their supervisor has loads of questions about QWE and not sure how to kind of sign it off and accredit it. So, you know, is it a matter that this person needs to kind of point their supervisory employer in the direction of the SRA for them to better understand what QWE means?
I've had quite a lot of questions of this nature, and my starting point would be, tell me more about your supervisor, because if your supervisor is someone that will go away and read the SRA website inside and out, then they'll do that, and the answer will be that they'll understand it and away they go. If they will, you know, go away and not look at it at all, then there's no point in signposting them. And actually, more often than not, what I advise people is to put together a very short summary that gives the answers to the key questions that they're worried about, and makes it absolutely clear that there's nothing to worry about on those fronts. So it makes it as easy as possible for them to think, gosh, there's no problem here, I can just approve it. So it's really trying to work out what is causing them the worry, what do they need to know, and then finding ways of giving them the answer to those questions. So again, it's quite individual, and it's quite challenging. And I fully admit that if you're taking it to a supervisor who may be, you know, reluctant, who may be, you know, aggressive in some respects, short of time, then it's quite difficult. But this is so important that you've got to give it a go, and you've got to perhaps, again, a bit like treating a difficult client. How do you treat a difficult client? You prepare really well, you work out what the questions are they're going to ask, you prepare the answers, you give it in the format that they want it. So again, quite individual, but you know, it's definitely worth making sure that you understand what's going to make them say yes.
I've also seen a tip, sorry to interject, I've seen a tip to ask them to confirm the experience, not to sign off the experience, because apparently that's technically what the SRA email to them will say. Can you confirm that they've had this experience? And I think the terminology sign off just seems a little more serious. So ask them to confirm your experience.
Thank you. One more question, which I actually meant to ask you earlier, John, but I got sidetracked and someone has asked it. So could we just have some information about for people who are either graduates internationally or they are qualified internationally? I know those are two separate points, and how the SQE and QWE is going to work for them in the UK to qualify as a solicitor in England or Wales.
Yes, there are some arrangements whereby qualifications are recognised in whole or in part, but I've seen quite a few students coming over from other countries in recent years who have spoken to the SRA, and that is the top tip: find out what the situation is for you, and have then been told that you either need to do everything or SQE2 is the only one that you need to do. So make sure you have your own qualification details, present them to the SRA to find out what that means for you. There have been quite a lot of Ukrainians that I've been speaking to recently who've been commonly interacting, quite a few people from Turkey as well. And so I think sheer weight of numbers means that the answers are coming back quite quickly now on those fronts, and therefore take your information, present it to the SRA, and they should give you the answer.
Great, thank you. I think that's it. I think that's our time, and that's flown by, and lots of questions we haven't managed to get around to answering. So if you do have individual kind of questions, don't forget that there's lots of information on both the University of Law website and Law Careers, and that's SQE Hub. And do bear in mind all the kind of advice that we've given you today about how to interpret it for your individual circumstances. So thank you so much to John and Sophie for taking part in today's masterclass, and we hope that for everyone watching, this has been very useful and kind of cleared up some of your questions and concerns about the QWE part of the SQE. As a reminder, as I said, our SQE Hub has lots of information, and we actually do have a QWE page as well, which we are regularly updating. We're pretty much monthly, weekly, kind of writing new articles, trying to kind of provide information on specific questions that aspiring lawyers have. Just another reminder before you go that we're going to be sending out an email within the next 24 hours with a link to the recorded session, so you might like to share that with other people or re-watch that if you would like. And finally, a survey will be popping up once this masterclass has ended, so do please fill that in. Let us know how you found today, how you found it useful, and what other topics you would like to see us cover in the future. So thank you again to John, Sophie, and the University of Law, and thank you to everyone attending today. We look forward to seeing you next time at our next event.